To geographers and environmental scientists, the environment refers to one's surroundings, including all the living and non-living factors with which people, animals, and other organisms coexist. In this lecture, we will examine the environmental challenges of the world to include global environmental change, such as global warming and land use land cover change. These topics are important to geographers to pinpoint and understand how human interactions affect the environment and where we need to focus our efforts to create a sustainable world. The reason humans can live on Earth is because of what scientists call the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect, as shown in the diagram on the left, is a natural process involving solar radiation and atmospheric gases that helps to warm the Earth. More specifically, solar radiation passes through the atmosphere and warms the Earth. As the Earth's surface warms, it emits heat, some of which passes back into space and some of which is trapped or absorbed by molecules of water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases that are found in our atmosphere. In the greenhouse effect, the atmosphere acts like a blanket over the Earth's surface. Therefore, greenhouse gases are very important and are of concern to us when human activities change the concentration of these gases. Global emissions of CO2 have more than doubled since 1970. The graph on the right shows the combustion of gas, liquid, and solid forms of fossil fuels generate most of the emissions. Land use change, especially deforestation, also raises CO2 levels because forests help remove CO2 from the atmosphere. It is a consensus among most scientists that human activity has amplified the greenhouse gas effect, which has contributed to global warming. Global warming is a rise in global temperatures primarily attributed to human activities that have increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Fluctuations in global temperatures are normal and in any single year are the result of a variety of natural and human factors, including solar radiation and greenhouse gases. Climate scientists focus on long-term trends such as the upward trend in temperatures since the 1960s, as shown in the graph on the left. The two graphs on the right show the relationship between the rapid increase of CO2 in the atmosphere and the associated rise in average annual temperature for the world. The graphs go back 1,000 years and show both CO2 and temperature to have been relatively stable until the recent industrial period, when the burning of fossil fuels began on a large scale. Global warming can have serious impacts on the environment, especially when sea level rises due to the melting ice in the Arctic, as well as consequences to ecosystems in which some species of plants, trees, and amphibians may become endangered or extinct. For humans, this could mean an increase in water scarcity, especially in arid and semi-arid regions of the Earth. The increase in carbon dioxide is one of the major factors for global warming, and recently the term carbon footprint has been used to describe the amount of CO2 humans are emitting. The graph on the left shows the top 5 emitters of CO2. While China is now the world's leading emitter, collectively China and the United States are responsible for 41% of the world's CO2 emissions, as shown in the chart at the top right. As shown in the bottom chart, emissions for Qatar, Trinidad and Tobago, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Brunei are a result of burning waste gas at natural gas wells. In other countries, high CO2 emissions stem from fossil fuel consumption for power and industry. In an effort to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, California is implementing a cap-and-trade program. The cap refers to company limits or allowances on greenhouse gases. To meet the cap, which is reduced over time, companies can reduce their emissions and/or buy trade allowances from other companies. Another key factor affecting global climate patterns is land use and land cover change, LULCC. LULCC is an interdisciplinary approach to studying human-environment interactions based on an awareness of the linkages between ecosystem processes and social conditions. Some examples of LULCC are the conversion of woodlands to agricultural fields and the drainage of wetlands to construct shopping centers. The map reveals the extent of deforestation in Amazonia. The red areas are the net forest lost from key forces propelling this deforestation, such as population growth and resettlement, logging, farm and ranch development, and road construction. Brazil has become a major beef exporter. The cattle ranching continues to spread into previously forested areas. Soybean farms are also increasingly common. In the satellite image and the photo on the right, on the bottom, the distinctive signature of logging in the Amazon is seen here. In order to quickly establish soybean farm and cattle ranches, the trees are typically burned. This practice destroys a natural sink of carbon dioxide, reducing biodiversity, releases significant amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and reveals the impact of LULCC across different scales. LULCC could also include natural changes or weather-induced changes along with human activities. As an example of this is on the coastline of Louisiana. About half of the coastal wetlands in the United States are located along the shores of the Gulf of Mexico. These wetlands not only provide habitats for a wide variety of aquatic and terrestrial species, they also help buffer storm surges, protect against erosion, improve water quality, and offer numerous opportunities for tourism and recreation. But these coastal wetlands continually face impacts that are both natural and human-induced. One result is the significant loss of land along the Louisiana coast. The top image shows the changing coastline with the help of remote sensing and GIS. Geographers and other scientists have identified where as well as how much of Louisiana's coastal wetlands have been lost to the Gulf of Mexico. Between 1932 and 2000, an area about the size of Delaware washed away, and between 2000 and 2005, an area about 10 times the size of Washington, D.C. is expected to be lost. In 2050, an area about 10 times the size of Washington, D.C. is expected to be lost. The satellite images in the bottom left photo show the effect that hurricanes Ivan and Katrina had on the northern half of the Chandelier Barrier Islands. Tropical storms can drastically reconfigure coastal landscapes. Oil and gas production from both on and offshore wells is a mainstay of Louisiana's economy. Many well sites in the coastal zones are not accessible by roads. Consequently, numerous channels have been built through the wetlands. In the image on the right of the Atchafalaya region, the channels are the straight or nearly straight waterways. Note the spatial association between the channels and the locations of well sites in purple. The international community has begun addressing global warming, and in 1992 they came together for the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro to discuss an agreement to voluntarily limit greenhouse gas emissions at set targets. 167 countries signed that agreement. In 1997 they met again in Kyoto, Japan to make the agreement formal because no one reached their target goals. The new agreement, called the Kyoto Protocol, stated that the countries would reduce their emissions back to 1990 levels by the year 2012. This new agreement had the force to become international law, but not everyone signed it because it required a stronger commitment. Two of the countries that did not sign it was Russia and the United States. However, it became law in 2005 when Russia finally signed it. The U.S. did not sign the agreement for two reasons. One, the U.S. was concerned that a reduction for the U.S. would harm the U.S. economy. And two, the U.S. was uncomfortable that China and India, both developing, were not subject to the restrictions, even though they had substantial emissions and they were increasing. Now in the third phase, a restricting of the agreement called the Copenhagen Accord, which is the successor to the Kyoto Protocol, contains the following basic principles. 1. Global warming is an urgent matter. 2. It is based on common but different responsibilities. 3. Developed countries will help developing countries adapt to the effects of global warming. 4. In lieu of a national program, state or localities can implement their own strategies. 5. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And 6. Developed countries will help financially to those countries with emerging economies to preserve tropical rainforests. There are 3 stumbling blocks to this solution. 1. China and India emphatically reject the notion that they must adhere to the plan because of fear that it would hurt their economies. Both think that they are different and should be treated differently, and that they believe the Western countries started the problem. 2. The amount of financial aid to be given is controversial. Developed countries don't want to be extorted by developing countries under the guise of global warming when the real reason are failures from their own government. And 3. Some are unsure if the United Nations is the appropriate agency to forge a global warming agreement, even though it is a global issue that affects everyone. It would make more sense to some if just the major polluters were to form a working group to solve the problem, namely China, US, Russia, India, and Europe. Please pause the video and answer the following. Explain how mapping and GIS is beneficial to the effects of global warming. Provide examples to illustrate your answer. In your own words, using the text as a guide, be thorough and specific with your answer.